So
That
moved.
motion.
Moved by Director Adams, second by Director Evans.
Yes.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Oh, sorry, roll call.
Roll call.
All right. Director Adams,
Aye.
Director Evans,
Aye.
and Director Riley.
Aye. Motion carries 3-0 unanimously, you might say. Action item number 2 is consider recommendation to the board an addendum to the district's ASR environmental impact report regarding the bypass pipeline. I would ask the staff to start this discussion, please.
Yeah, we're going to turn this over to John Lear. I did note it looks like Ian from CalAm, Ian Crooks is on, as well as Tim O'Halloran. So in addition to Tyler Potter, we have folks who can answer questions if need be.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, great. Okay, welcome, directors. Yes, this item is an item that we had talked about at the last water supply planning meeting, and it is to construct a pipeline that would allow for the simultaneous operations of the Carmel River ASR project and recovery of pure water Monterey water. This would be encountered, the situation where that would be necessary would be encountered if we had a wet year and we were injecting into the shoulder months of April, May of Carmel River water, and the need to move over and recover the pure water Monterey water to get the water into the transfer pipeline in order to get the water over to Forest Lake's supply tanks so that it can meet the demand on the peninsula. And so it is a pipeline that we decided the best way to go about this was to provide or produce an addendum to the ASR EIR. And the purpose of the addendum is to say we did not envision that this would be, we would encounter this problem because pure water Monterey was not constructed at the time we did this EIR. And now we need to construct this pipeline in order to, so that we can operate this ASR project. The addendum was finished last week and emailed out to the directors today at the meeting in effort to provide it to you. We will provide a link to it on our website, and it will be available for the full board to review should you recommend this go forward to the full board. What we were asking today is that you would recommend to move this to the full board for adoption, and then we could start with the construction of the pipeline. And with that, I'll close and answer any question, or please feel free to address question towards any of the other individuals that Dave had mentioned.
Any member of the committee want to ask any questions?
Have any questions at this time?
No, I understand it, so I don't really have any questions for it either.
Okay, Molly, I didn't understand your comment.
I
Yeah,
do not have any
No,
questions.
did not. Okay, thank you. I have one, well, no, it's more of a discussion. I do have one question about the design of the system and the problem it's trying to solve. And I know the water is coming in both directions, so you need two pipes to kind of make that transition through that section. How long is the overlap problem that this solves? Is it a 2, 3, 4, 5 month kind of dilemma? That's kind of my understanding, but I'm trying to clarify it for myself.
Yeah, I can answer that. It depends on once the operational yield for pure water Monterey is built up, there'll be 3,500 acre feet a year that need to be pumped out of the ground per the water purchase agreement. And that is approximately a 3 to 4 month overlap that causes.
So it's kind of a similar problem with building to capacity for a period of time that's not fully useful. I know it's redundant, it's needed, I understand that. But ASR is just a similar project. You can only pump when the water's allowed to be pumped. It's not in use the full year, for that purpose anyway. Is this pipe section we're talking about likely to be idle for a period of time, or will it be back in use going in the other direction?
Well, I would cede this question to Ian most likely, but I think that it would be in use on these shoulder months that is required. It could be used also as well when you're diverting water in ASR, when you're not recovering. The idea is that in order to have ASR 1 and 2 be able to recover the pure water Monterey and get it to the transfer pipeline, you would bring the water through this new pipeline and limit your injection to site 2, which is ASR 3 and 4. So that's when it would be being used. And it's because we're in this situation where we have not met the CDO yet, and we're bringing on this new source of water. And the bottleneck that you're inquiring after is because the wells that are in Seaside can pump and only meet the demand of the old Seaside system. The new wells, the ASR wells, can get the water into the general Jim Moore pipeline and over to the transfer pipeline to get the water to the main demand center of the peninsula. So it's really a problem of where you have the supply and where you have the demand, and this pipeline solves that problem. And I don't know, Ian, if you have anything else to add.
Yeah, Ian, if you do.
Yeah, I hit unmute. Am I unmuted?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Oh, great. Hey, yeah, all great. Great question, and thanks, John, for the good summary of the need for the project. Yeah, I think that you just look at it in general, it provides much greater flexibility for the operation of the entire ASR system in conjunction with the pure water Monterey wells. It just it really simplifies overall operations, and you don't necessarily have to sweat all the details during the year of what's available, what's going through the pipeline, what's your operation scenario, if you only had one pipeline. So the two pipelines just gives you all sorts of flexibility and reliability in the long run. And again, as we become more and more dependent on that system as a system, why not have another pipe? That pipe was to break or have a leak, it impacts operations significantly nowadays. So it's just that added level of redundancy as well. So overall, it's a great thing for the system long term.
Well, and with water supply coming from different directions and different sources and different requirements about those sources, I can understand it's complex. I just was trying to get clarification about, and I understand, John, from earlier discussions about if we have to shut off ASR in order to use other water, we miss an opportunity to take advantage of the ASR water that's available. And we're not in a position to let any available water go by without it being part of our formulas. So I understand that. Anyway, thanks for the discussion. I'm not sure I quite understand everything yet, but yeah, Mary?
Yes, thank you very much. So essentially, will the ratepayers be charged for paying by having to pay for this?
Yeah, it will go into rate base as part of CalAM's initially undepreciated, and then as it depreciates, it reduces the rate impact over time. But yeah, it'll go into rate base.
And then there's no way around this. We have to do this. It's not just that we're going to do this to have a second line, as Ian had said, because that's a great idea. It's because we're not going to get the water if we don't put this transfer pipe in.
Yeah, basically there would be, as John said, think of it more in terms of normal to wet periods. There will be a bottleneck that this will resolve. In a very dry period where perhaps we're not doing any injection, then there's no competition for which direction at that point. But yeah, so
Thank you.
half the years.
Okay, I'm willing to take it out to the public if there are any public comments.
Chair Riley, I see no raised hands.
Thank you. We'll bring it back to the committee. Are there other questions, committee members, about this project?
I'll make a motion to send it to the full board.
I'll second the motion.
Thank you. Motion by Director Adams. I'm sorry, Evans. Second by Director Adams. I have one question before proceeding, and it's more of just information. As I was reading this material, it seemed to me that no, wait a minute. I think I'm on the next agenda. It's the purification facility I'm talking about, the chlorination facility.
Which we're going to provide an update on under item 5.
Okay, then maybe I'll just, okay, it doesn't relate to this. Okay, moved and seconded by the two. Roll call, please.
Director Adams,
Aye.
Director Evans,
Aye.
and Director Riley.
Aye,
Unanimous approval.
thank you. Move to discussion item on item 3, discussion of the cost of water calculation.
Yes, this was put on the agenda at the request of the committee chair. I think the staff note is pretty self-explanatory. So I'm just open to questions.
Yeah, I'm glad to see this actually. And I thought it was particularly interesting over the period of time we've been dealing with these issues, and cost comparisons and so on. Not to try to confuse anything any more than it is, but Dave, I'll direct it to you, but I don't know that I have a question here. I was looking into the information on advice letters 1220, and I found a reference to 1220-A, which is a modification of sorts. And I went to the same page, your attachment 3C3 that you had in the staff report. And there's a different C3 attachment in the amended report that shows even lower numbers than what you show.
Right.
And I'm trying to catch up with who's correcting what and where's the source of the numbers? Can you add any more?
Yeah, I'll have to go back and look. Whenever you see a corrected report, it'll be an A, dash A or dash B, dash C, depending on the number of corrections. I'd have to read the narrative to find out what trickled through to those numbers. They shouldn't be going down relative to, it could go down relative to the prior report, the 1220. But the systemic problem with the denominator problem is still in there.
Right, and I did notice that problem still exists. What's the effect of having data that's got erroneous calculations in it at this late date? Because anyway.
Well, there's no public discussion very often about cost. You see a newspaper article from time to time, and there's been issues raised about the cost of pure water Monterey water in the first coming fiscal year. But yeah, from time to time, it's just confusion because you don't really know what you're comparing to. It's come out at several public forums, but absent knowledge about it, your only go-to documents are the go-to documents that are formally filed.
Yeah. Director Adams?
Thank you. Yeah, so it just bugs me when numbers are wrong because it's the only thing that we generally can count on. So I was wondering, do these numbers ever get revisited? And do we have an opportunity to raise this issue again so that we can get the corrected numbers?
Well, yeah, a couple of things to keep in mind as well. It's, these were based on the financial model that was used for the actual testimony and decision-making. But similar to Pure Water Monterey, construction hasn't been undertaken. We don't know if there's going to be change orders. There's some potential hiccups with the cost of capital. The financial model assumed that there was a public financing piece, a corporate equity piece, and a state revolving fund piece. Last year, during the state revolving fund process, the recommendation of the state was to fully fund all of the debt component pieces with state revolving fund, which would change the cost of capital from what is even in these numbers. It would reduce it. There's also a cash piece where during the construction period, a portion would be paid with basically a surcharge. During the course of the many years that this went through, that amount changed as well. So ultimately, until it's under construction and change orders are known and the cost of capital is locked in, these are all just estimates. And so just like with Pure Water Monterey, where in 2015 and 16, we projected $1,720 per acre foot. Then when bids came in and design got more extensive and a few change orders, you could see the price of the water going up, and it breached the $2,000 per acre foot range. So these numbers are only just relative placeholders until all the other things are known. But it'd be nice to know on a relative basis what you're actually comparing to. And I think that's been the weakness of what's been represented in print versus what should have been in print.
Right. So if we had let the CPUC know about this, and my understanding is that we had, was there a reason why they didn't want to make a change?
We did raise it. It was in testimony. I don't have a good answer for you, Supervisor. I mean, it's one of those things that just perpetuated and never got fixed.
Any other questions from the committee? I still have a couple more questions. Back to why I think this is kind of an important subject. You look at the public dialogue around Monterey One water and the costs of the 3,500 acre feet, cost of the expansion. And people have different understandings about different cost matters, and cost is a key issue on all these projects. I'm just concerned that if it's not, and I'm going to go back to you, Dave, briefly, but this is not a question of estimating. This is a question of math, just simple. What's the denominator? And I know this is not an action item, so I'm going to conclude here as far as I'm concerned with a question to you, but also to the committee, that I'd like to pursue a formal letter to CalAm if they would modify these numbers if the denominator were accurate, and just see if they could correct the math. I would just like to know, and maybe it's too late, and maybe it's they'll choose not to respond. And I'm not going to ask for a CalAm response today, but I'm wondering if we couldn't put this on an agenda item in the future, simply for a letter to ask for clarification. Is that a possible letter? I'm not trying to get them in trouble or us in trouble, but I do think the public does go off on various tangents about what costs are and what the numbers are and the source of those numbers. And if this is an official document and officially approved and officially processed through CalAm and the PUC and their Division of Water, so it's gotten 3 vettings without being discovered and without being corrected. And I'm just wondering if I'm just hoping that we can ask for a clarification of the numbers. Okay, I will follow up with you on this if need be, but if there are no other comments or questions from the committee, we'll go to the next item. So one more time, any more questions? I suppose I should ask if there are any public comments on this item as well. Go back to Arlene.
Chair Riley, I see no raised hands.
Thank you. Okay, back to the committee. Item number 4 on presentations. Again, there are no actions expected on any of these items, the rest of the agenda. So, General Manager, over to you for cease and desist.
Yeah, this was, I think, also requested at the last committee meeting to revisit what the milestones are, especially in the context of notification of the State Water Board of the likelihood that this year's September 30th milestone is likely to be missed. So I attached as Exhibit 4A, directly from the cease and desist order, the milestones, the impact of the missed milestones, and the resulting effective diversion limits. Importantly, and actually, Arlene, do you have the supplement that you can put up on the screen?
Yes.
Subsequent to the packet coming out, Chair Riley asked, well, what's the specific language that would allow a waiver of a milestone? And that is coming up.
That's not what you wanted. Let's see what could be the problem here. I apologize.
Yeah, there's 3 things I provided, and then one that's.
I downloaded them.
Uh-huh.
So let's see if I can get them another way. Here they are. It's item 4. The Water Bay. Here we go. Yes. And this is not what you want.
No.
We'll get there.
Not that one.
And I know it's not this one. So let's see. This is this was a PDF that you provided me, Dave.
Yeah, there were three items I sent you this morning.
Yes. And there are.
Well, so going back to
it's here.
Yeah, so while Arlene's pulling that up, if you go back, much of the tale is told in footnotes. And so in footnote 16 on page 20 of the packet, applicants includes CalAm, the Mayor's Authority, our district, Pebble Beach Company, and the City of Pacific Grove. So here you can see the highlighted text that says, and if you could, yeah, thank you. if the report indicates that a milestone is likely to be missed for reasons beyond applicant's control. So it's not just the company, it's the mayor's authority, the district, Pebble Beach Company, and Pacific Grove. So if any of those had control over an action that resulted in a milestone being missed, then all bets are off. But if none of those applicants had control over it, then the State Water Board can grant relief by waiving the reduction in the 1,000 acre feet. So that is an option. And I think it does drive behavior to some extent. The company's unwillingness to pull their application to the Coastal Commission at the Coastal Commission's request might have been driven by this language and so forth. But this is the language where there is potential for relief.
Dave, do the applicants have to agree, or this is kind of individually on each applicant to have their independent role played out in?
Yeah, it wasn't wordsmithed to be that we had to all agree, but I think every applicant doesn't want this on their shoulders, a 1,000 acre foot reduction. So I think everyone would pull the oars in the same direction, so to speak.
And the implication of it not being at the fault of any of the parties. Just run through that again, because there's a cost issue and a water issue.
Right. Yeah, and I think we're further along there's a real issue with what's going to happen at the cliff at the December 31st, 2021 point in time. Is no project, and again, remember I said a lot of the storyline is in the footnotes. So if you were to go back to page 20, footnote 17 says, hey, if there's some alternate water project of substantial size, then these milestones could be revisited. Well, at this point, there's really no single water project, the desal plant, Pure Water Monterey expansion, or anything else that's in anyone's mind that can be done by the deadline. So I think that State Water Board staff already recognizes that at some point they're going to have to address the issue of what happens when you miss the end point. I think in the interim, and I know this to be fact because I've had conversations with State Water Board staff, they do realize that the water accounting generally works in that the community could survive a 1,000 acre foot drop on paper, but they're uncertain whether the plumbing is currently plumbed. John talked about the issues with running ASR and Pure Water Monterey extraction at the same time. Issues of moving water from the Monterey pipeline up into Carmel Valley. So you have to not only do the math, but also look at the hydraulics. So the issue is, yeah, we're likely going to miss September. The State Water Board does have the authority to not impose a 1,000 acre foot reduction. They have a sense that the community could survive it because our pumping history is quite a bit below the effective diversion limit. But we don't know what they're going to do. And, this tells you what the ramifications can be. But from a cost perspective, we're going to have to come up with some project and get it on a timeline and then rework these timelines, because at some point you're past December 31st of next year.
30th.
30th. 31st.
Let's put this on the agenda so we settle it. Continue.
No, it was funny though. It was funny because the first version of our conservation ad for June had the days of the week that you could water on it, had a little calendar page. and it had June 31st.
Well, creative scheduling, that's all right. Dave, back a little more on this point. Is there any, is Cal-Am the only party that can initiate an action like to waive the penalty, the ramp down? Can other parties initiate?
Yeah, yes. I think basically what you have to occur is, I mean, the notice has already been provided. That was what's in the staff note itself. Any one of the applicants is still a party. They could do that. Any other party could, reasonably send a letter to the Deputy Director of Water Rights, saying, please don't take an enforcement action. It was not the cause of any one of these, of the applicant parties, and, go from there, sure.
And my related question, just a moment, Mary. My related question is, would there be any reason to support Cal-Am's request or statement that it's not to it's not their fault, in order to try to prevent a ramp down? What I'm wondering is, if we allow a ramp down without an argument, are we buying into an argument that the State Water Board then has, and we did not make, that we have enough of reserve and ability to survive a ramp down? Would we be better off trying to argue not to impose the ramp down in general, which would support Cal-Am's argument, so that then we have all of our reserve arguments still in the quiver? Otherwise, we give them up. And I'm just inquiring about a strategic position for the district to consider, or for you to consider.
Well, as I'm sure Mr. Laredo would advise you in anything, that you try to exhaust your administrative remedies first. And if one of the remedies is to plead that it wasn't our fault and ask for relief, yeah, that would be the first best step, and keep the effective diversion limit up. Give yourself the greatest flexibility, the biggest buffer.
Dave Laredo, you want to chime in?
I believe it's risky to spin hypotheticals and to contemplate what the position of the district might be given those hypotheticals. There are so many variables. I would highly recommend that you be open to all options when that comes. Perhaps supporting, perhaps not. It's hard to say what the different factors are and what the ramifications might be.
Mary, I'll go over to you now.
Yeah, I think this is the same discussion that I was interested in having, which is, what is the appetite of the State Water Resources Control Board right now? Are they so fed up with us, they're going to say, let's just, even though it's not their fault, let's just give them 1,000 acre feet less? I don't know where they're coming from at this point. Or will they think we're doing such a great job, they'll just let us kind of slip by under the radar screen? And then in addition to that, I'm just trying to ascertain, what would the public's feeling be about this? I have a feeling that when the public hears, oh my God, they didn't make no one made the deadline, wasn't their fault, but we're going to be 1,000 acre feet less, does that mean I can't water my lawn at all anymore?
Right.
I'm trying to kind of think about it in a, a different sense, so to speak.
Yeah. And I can tell you, there's some, actually, Supervisor, some of your own constituents from your supervisory district have already made those statements. If we miss a deadline, one deadline, we're going to be in rationing. We can't do the things we want to do. I think the district has contended that that is not the case. I think it's the path of least resistance for the state to just reduce the effective diversion limit. That being said, there are, as Dave Laredo said, there's a lot of moving parts, and we can't really commit but it's always better to have a diversion limit of 8,310 acre feet than it is to have 7,310. So,
When do you think we might find out?
you
September,
know, things are
October
moving
1?
things are moving relatively fast, and it's, do you want to, test those waters before you miss the milestone? What we have here is that the April filing that said we expect to miss the deadline or the milestone. So you could take that and run with it and start the process now. Or even ask, what is the process going to be for them to contemplate providing relief? And, we'll be at the end of September in the blink of an eye. If you think about, how quickly things happen. The way we got the whole cease and desist order moved and extended, though, was a huge, gross joint effort. It included a lot of bodies in the room working cooperatively, and probably took over 15 months between the first sit down with the state and the final draft application that went in to move it. And we obviously don't have that kind of time in this case, but I think it's something that we should talk about, being proactive or waiting for them to do something and be reactive.
I cannot help but feel that COVID will also factor into their decision making.
Yeah. Well, think about this also, if they took the action and it's October 1st and they said, well, you've officially missed your milestone, your new effective diversion limit is 7,310. We won't know if we've met that new limit or not met that new limit until September 30th of 2021. So, you could make decisions here to fight for it at that time, get it reinstated or get it waived and still end up okay. So, we have some options. We just, we the district don't completely control this, but to the earlier question, any one of those applicants has standing to file a request. So.
Well, it does seem to me that, Dave, even though you say any of the agencies could file, it's the district that's likely to do anything because the others are bit players, I think.
Well, the company, this is
No, I'm excluding the company.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
I was really surprised at your comment.
No, I was excluding Cal-Am from that comment. Sorry about that. No disrespect to Cal-Am on whether they're a bit or not. Well, this will be on the agenda again for updates, so we'll need to continue to be updated.
Mr. Riley, you have not gone out to the public on this item, I don't
I'm
believe.
sorry. Okay.
And I also have a question when it's
I'm sorry,
appropriate.
Molly. So Molly, you first.
So thank you. On the second bullet point, you talked about the stay on physical construction on the desal plant imposed by the Superior Court. It says that it currently remains in place until at least April 21st, 2020. And considering now that we're a month and a half beyond that, is there an updated date? Yes, that statement is still correct, but
And I think the judge actually extended it
I think she
to
did till after the Coastal Commission reviews.
Yeah.
I thought there had been a change, but I didn't see it in the staff note, and that's why I raised the question.
Right. And I was just lifting from the quarterly report, but you're correct.
Okay, thanks. That's all I have.
Okay. Thank you. Can we go out to the public, please, Arlene?
Oh, all right. We have a speaker. Ian, please present your comment.
Yeah, hi. I just wanted to add to Dave's good comments that it does take time to make any presentation to the board, along with getting the community together in one cohesive voice. The milestones are going to be hard to make a change, or not make a change, make a difference in terms of the state board action on those items. I just wanted to remind folks we should focus on the cliff at the end of 2021.
Yeah.
3376. Not be so focused on the missed milestones. There are opportunities for the water credits and water stored in ASR to make help get us by. Again, goes back to the parallel pipeline need for that to help there. But just if we can, if anything collectively that we're going to do, we should focus on the cliff, is my opinion.
And I'd like to echo that. You know, I've actually heard attorneys for, let's just call it opponents to the desal plant say, well, of course, the state board will just continue to extend the CDO with some effective diversion limit and the ability to use carryover credits. And the answer is no, it's not certain. The provision for what the diversion limit is, it's a whole new ballgame. The likelihood that the carryover credits would continue at the same balance that's been built up is not guaranteed. And that is, it's a significant risk that the community cannot survive a full stop to 3,376 acre feet. It would be extraordinarily close, but you know, this is not to be taken lightly. And the concept of working to open this agreement back up and extend it somehow is really something that we're going to have to get started on right away, because of, as I said earlier, there's no project that can get done by December 31st of next year.
I want to go back to the public if there are any more public comments.
Chair Riley, I see no other raised hands.
Okay, thank you. Back to the committee. Dave, maybe, and I would ask Ian the same question. Are you two in pretty near agreement on how to interpret and what the math says about reserve and credits and cushion?
Spreadsheets like that are what keep Chris Cook up at night. So we're sort of in agreement, but we're not entirely confident that we're in agreement. So in other words, as I've said earlier, the water accounting works, but the two other limiting factors are, well, actually, let's say three, are extraction capacity, the ability to pump water from the north to the south and up into the valley, and fluctuations in demand or potential fluctuations in demand in different zones. You know, I think John mentioned earlier that, you know, seaside water extractions typically are used to meet seaside demand, and they don't have a direct link to the Monterey pipeline to bypass Old Monterey to get around the corner. So you might have water sitting in the seaside basin, and if you can't get it to where it's needed, then you haven't solved the problem. And so those are the things where I don't think we've had a real thorough conversation as to where we are or where we aren't. You know, most recently, I think it was last month's meeting or the prior month's meeting, I did show you how we're at less than 800 acre feet within range of meeting the cease and desist order. So if you've had another 800 acre feet of water in your system, maybe you're okay. But the long-term lifting of the CDO, just being okay is not enough. Being on that knife's edge is not enough. You have to have water for growth or for, you know, future need. So, and if you have to rely on carryover credit from water not used in a year, or carryover credit in the Seaside Basin from the alternate producers, or a successful Table 13 water right year. These are little pieces of water that you can't say are going to be there year in and year out. And so you might have a year where they all line up perfectly. You say, hey, look, we can do this. We can make it through. But you need predictability. So very long-winded answer saying, no, we're not quite there in complete agreement as to what we can rely on reliably year in and year out for the next 3 to 4 years.
I'm going to ask that this item be continued. I mean, we'll have an update again, but I want Ian to know that at least I would like to hear his point of view too about where are there differences between Cal-Am and maybe the district, because I think if there's going to be an agreement with anybody, it's more that we and Cal-Am should agree before we even interact with the State Water Board. It's not that, will the State Water Board agree with the district or will the State Water Board agree with Cal-Am? No, if Cal-Am and the district are in agreement, then we're probably fighting from the same turf and more likely to have at least a more coherent argument, regardless of when we make the argument or what the entire argument is. So anyway, so what I'm going to ask is maybe next meeting we can get an update, but I want to ask if Cal-Am would participate in this discussion more than just maybe commenting on what we're talking about. That's just a request, and I'm just asking Ian if he'll kind of, I'm not even just asking for an answer, I just alerting him to this.
Yeah,
right.
Thank you, George. No problem. I think what'll help is in 2 days, July 8th, we're kicking off our monthly meetings between the agencies. I think that'll really help us get into the weeds and details of where we're all in agreement on supplies.
Okay, good. Thank you. Well, thank you both, Ian and Dave. Let's go. And if there are no other questions, let's go to ASR update.
Hey, George, Melody. Just wonder if you're there. I was just looking at your comment or your letter. A couple of.
Hey, Melody, is that you? Can you mute?
I'm on a Zoom. I can't talk.
Oh.
Sorry, that was a phone call. I couldn't find it.
I think I recognized her voice.
Yeah, I sure did.
All right, so this next item is one of my favorites because there's such good photography. We got pictures, and it's really cool to watch things get built. So Maureen Hamilton is on. Maureen, you want to walk us through this?
Sure, thanks. Can you hear my microphone okay?
Yes.
Awesome. If you could advance to the next slide, please, Arlene. So where we left off last month was the meter vault had been installed, and this month we installed the meter. It's a 24-inch meter largely located in our driveway. The second photo shows the unmarked conduits and small water lines, so it went a little slower than we hoped, but with some long hours, everything in the meter vault got installed within schedule.
Maureen, excuse me, could you speak up a little louder, please?
Oh, you bet. Sorry, is this better?
Thank you. Thank you. Yes.
Okay. Arlene, could you advance, please? We have a blow-off line for the header, so that once we bring things on and off and get the chlorine where it needs to go, we are able to discharge water directly to the pond. You can see them installing a 16-inch clay valve in the picture on the left, meter behind it in order to keep back pressure on the system and measure what's going to waste. And the red pipe was completed the installation of that blow-off line. Arlene, can you please advance? This is the southern driveway. I call this one right now because we get a lot of questions about it headed into production season. This is our AS1 production line. This is a 30-inch pipeline being tied into the main distribution line that goes to the Hillby pump station and on to the Monterey Peninsula. The second photo shows the tie-in on the eastern side of the meter vault that'll head directly over to our well ASR1, which is the only well that's currently approved for production. Next slide, please, Arlene. This is kind of a before and after with the above ground injection manifold. From my perspective, it felt like this just went up overnight. They did a stellar job, so much easier to work above ground. The manifold is about, shorter one is 45 feet, the longer one is 50 feet. And we have several appurtenances in there that made it some challenging days, but they did an awesome job getting that constructed. Next slide, please, Arlene. I thought this was cool, but this is coming from my geeky engineering side. One of the things you need to do when you're putting in chemicals, you need to make sure it has good contact over the slug of water that's going through the pipe. And because we're then going into a meter off which we're going to control off of 45 or 50 feet, sounds really long, but when you're talking about mixing large volumes of water and then sending that water through a meter so that you can control your chemical injection, you need to stabilize the flow, and that's the stabilizers, the photo on the left. So it was really cool to get to look inside the physical pipe or the physical section of pipe with the mixer and stabilizer before we did install those. So that's just me geeking out. Next slide, please, Arlene. And this is what we call the southern tie-in. This is how water from the middle school site and eventually Fitch Park would get to the Santa Margarita site. The photo on the left, the closer pipe, is the old 30-inch tie-in that they had to cut and cap. You can see the new 30-inch pipe coming at us. It's the pipe above. And the drawing on the right is just stringing out the pipes and the bends after the old 30-inch was cut and capped. Next slide, please, Arlene. Then the tank showed up, and just illustrating the size, the very large tank on the right is for the sodium hypochlorite for disinfectant. The smaller tank on the left is for zinc orthophosphate or phosphoric acid, and it will handle either. And I wanted to get a comparison of the sizes because certainly one of those tanks drove the design a little bit more than the other. On the picture on the right, those are the beams that get installed in each of the rooms so that they can get the tank in and then lower it in place in a controlled manner. Next slide, please, Arlene. This is photos of the big tank going in. I stayed as far back as I could, and it just was an impressive operation to watch. They had the 4 prime contractor crewmen plus their site superintendent, and the project manager was even in there directing and putting in some elbow grease. Next, Darlene. These are just more photos of the tank going in. Yeah, we were holding our breath. Yeah. It was not easy. It was not easy. Next slide, please, Arlene. And there's where it's basically completely level, resting on some ductile iron pipe as they rolled it in and finally got it into place, and just kind of called it a day at that point. Next slide, please, Arlene. And this is starting the rough grading process. Most of all of the underground work is done. Now we're just working on concrete, final grade, getting asphalt in place, in a few other concrete features that we're having constructed. And that is all I have today.
Thank you, Marie. They're excellent photos. That's very good quality work. About the engineering too. I'm just
I'm grateful for the iPhone.
Yeah, it's a pretty impressive. Any comments, questions from the committee?
So cool.
Yeah.
The only comment I have is that I drove past it on the way here, and I haven't done that in months for obvious reasons, and it looks amazing. So well done.
Yeah, and you got tight quarters there too. You've been talking about the size of the plot you're working on, as well as the building, as well as the size of the components that go inside. What a collection of engineering. Yeah, well done.
I'm happy to pass that on to the designer. Thank you.
Yeah, well, It's impressive. It looks impressive. Any other questions? Any more from Dave? Anyone else?
I just go out to the public.
Okay, we'll go to the public.
I see no raised hands.
Okay, come back to the committee. I have no other questions or comments. So can we go to item number 6, which
Yes,
an update
let's
on pure water.
let's do a couple of things here. Maureen, stay close. But first, Arlene, if you put up the supplement to this, the other piece. So there's the single sheet. So Chair Riley requested a graphic. I realize it's too busy here, but we'll have this sent out to all the committee members. And this shows the ASR wells is kind of a crosshatch circle. It shows the pure water Monterey wells as well. You can kind of see them on the right hand side. You got the monitoring wells, and you've got the purple Vado zone wells, and then the blue are production wells in the Seaside Basin. So Arlene, sometime tomorrow, if you just send that PDF to all the committee members, there was a specific request for something like that. And thanks to Maureen for digging it out. Now let's move on to the discussion about Pure Water Monterey update.
Before we leave this slide quickly, oh, there's the code. I see it. All right. I was looking for a code. It's there. Thank you.
Hopefully you all got a chance to see Chair Ron Stefani's letter to the editor or guest opinion rebutting Mr. Rick Hoyer's somewhat misinformed letter about Pure Water Monterey. I thought Chair Stefani's response was very, very good, very thorough, very pointed. The most important takeaway is the project's producing water, and we're putting water in the ground. So when you get an article that says not 1 ounce has been delivered to the tap, well, that's true because we're building the operating reserve. And I think that the letter to the Herald clearly made that distinction. The one problem that we continue to have, though, is, and forgive me, those of you who've heard this analogy before, but we went out and acquired a really hot sports car, and we made the door to the garage too narrow. And so we've got this plant that can produce fabulously pure water. We've got a pipeline that can carry it, but we don't have the injection capacity. And let's talk a little bit about that and what that's doing to us. And it's, on a $124 to $126 million project, the fix for the garage door is relatively inexpensive. But let's talk about what is going on over there and what we might be able to do about it. So with that, Arlene, if you bring up the presentation. There we go. Next slide. And next. So this is taken from our sister agency. Went through their recycled water committee as well as the board. They now have an understanding what some of the issues are. So what I want to do is review the injection well facilities and the objectives, as well as current status, discuss some remedial steps, as well as a third deep injection well, and then talk about next steps and timing. The next slide, please. So the original water purchase agreement in 2016 basically cited the delivery point as up to 8 wells, 4 well pairs with a deep injection well and a Vado zone well. In the course of the engineering design work and the hydrogeology analysis, it was thought that the project could survive on just 2 well pairs, which is the way it was built. And I think our staff had some reservations as to whether that might be cutting it too close. And those reservations proved to be true. Next slide, please. So this slide, Maureen, maybe you can identify better what's on this slide.
You bet. In almost the dead center of the graphic, you'll see well site number 2. And I get teased for this regularly with deep injection well 1 because it's the first well we constructed. The operations are renaming that well site because well 1 at well site 2 is confusing. So we have DIW 1 that was constructed as part of phase 1 of the injection well field. There's a small yellow triangle a little bit to the left of that. That's our electrical building. Further to the left and down a bit is well site 3 with DIW 2 and Vado Zone well 2. We're keeping the names of the wells now associated with the well sites. Again, I own what happened there. Back up at well site 2, we have VZW1B. These Vado Zone wells were difficult to construct, so VZ1 failed. We built VZ2. We went back to try VZ1A. It failed, and we finally got VZ1B constructed. In almost the bottom left-hand corner of the screen is the Percolation Basin. You can see that driving from General Jim Moore. There are 2 monitoring well sites in between Clearwater, Monterey, and ASR that are very minor.
Right. And our ASR operations are kind of right above the monitoring well 2 rectangle, if you will. Next slide, please. So this is what the expectations were. This is what we're trying to meet. So during the initial commissioning period, we need to establish an operating reserve. It looks like we will make that number mid to late August, within the 6 months of the official beginning of injection. But then there's an obligation to add another 750 acre feet to the reserve over the period of 3 years so that the operating reserve becomes approximately half of the annual delivery requirement. The annual delivery requirement is 3,500 acre feet. And then if the growers and the County Water Resources Agency continue to stay involved, then we will be establishing up to 1,000 acre feet of drought reserve over a 5-year period, or approximately 200 acre feet per year. I can tell you in the first year of operations, it's very likely that they will not be requiring that drought reserve. So it's unclear to us if we're going to be setting aside that water or not. Given current capabilities, it's likely that we would be unable to do so, but given the remediation, we certainly would be able to. So currently, we've been averaging about 167 acre feet per month. We had a couple of months that were better, but due to limitations of geology, as well as the subsidence that we're going to talk about in a second, it's been less than what we require kind of at full build out. So in those first 3 years of operations, we need about capability of 329 acre feet per month. Next slide, please. So to meet 3,950 acre feet, that would be, ultimately what's required in years 1, 2, and 3 for certain. You would need kind of an average of 308 with a max of 338, a minimum of 288, and so forth. And this assumes the gallons per minute, the GPM that you see kind of in the middle of the chart with system downtime. And as a result of the downtime, your injection rate is going to need to be anywhere from 2490 in the minimum month to 2800 in the maximum month. That's what you need to do month in and month out on average to meet the performance objectives. Next slide. All right. So again, the column that's marked planned capacity basically says it was about 3,000. So recall VZW is Veda Zone well, DIW is deep injection well. So here are the gallons per minute that were kind of planned for each well. Would have produced in excess of the required injection rate. That's, you know, the beauty of designing things on paper before you learn everything about what's under the surface of the earth in real life. Early on, we did discover that Veda Zone well 1B just had a problem. Its geology was different than the geology just a few hundred feet away. Veda Zone 2 was doing 350, so 400 combined. Really where you wanted those to be was probably closer to 700 combined. And the deep injection wells were ramping up, getting close to their planned capacity before we started to detect some attenuation in their ability to inject. And so in the final column, you can see current injection rates. We had the subsidence issue with Veda Zone well number 2, which resulted in both shallow wells being turned off, and they're currently still off. And the deep injection wells have shown a decline in their ability to inject. Deep injection well number 2 more so than 1. So our current capacity is about 1,400 gallons per minute, which is approximately 1/2 of the required injection rate. Next slide. So the goals, or some of the immediate remediation that we are focused on, is some final commissioning of the deep injection well. So as we progress closer to the culmination of the operating reserve, then the idea is to go in and swab, basically do a little conditional rehabilitation as the final commissioning of the deep wells. And hopefully that will bring them up, back up from where they've declined to. That would happen in the fall. And then the shallow wells, the goal is to stabilize the concrete pads at the wellhead and get them back up to operations at some level so that both the deep and the shallow are working again by the end of this calendar year. Next slide, please. So even with these improved injection rates, you know, after finishing the commissioning and so forth and the restart, the Veda Zone wells, the expectations are not as high as their original performance. And all in, we're thinking that we're going to be kind of stuck at the high end at 250 gallons per minute, low end 150. And with some final commissioning of the deep injection wells, getting them back up almost to the highs of their performance here in the last few months. So then you look at the subtotal of the deep and the total of the Veda Zone wells. We're still kind of at that just under 2,000 acre feet, or I'm sorry, 2,000 gallons per minute on average. Whereas again, we need to be at 2,800 gallons per minute. So the annual potential recharge kind of at the mid level of those gallons per minute rates is just under 2,800 acre feet per year. But remember, our delivery requirement is 3,500 plus additions to the operating reserve and possibly to the drought reserve. Next slide. So the goal would be a third deep injection well to make up that difference between that midpoint and the 2,800 gallons per minute. There's 2 already identified sites that have already gone through the CEQA process as part of the original EIR. Originally, we were concerned about what appeared to be the better geology, which is that green circle, which is well site 4. The other site's down by the Percolation Basin at the other end of the Blue Line Road that you see here on this chart. But it turns out we don't need a pump station, so that makes well site. I'm sorry, see, the well sites actually go in order right to left, 1, 2, 3, 4. So 4 is down by the Percolation Basin, 1 is the green circle. And don't get me to rehash how we end up naming the wells versus the sites, but so well site 1 is the better geology, that green circle. And originally it was thought it was going to need a pump station to get it up there. It does not. And so that's the more optimistic one. I think, Maureen, step in here at some point. Are we going to do test borings on both sites?
Yes.
Yep. So we'll learn a little bit more about what their geology looks like and which one is more likely the better performer. And that's something we're working on pretty much getting a schedule for right away. Next slide, please. So with the third well, kind of going back to that previous slide, you can see there's a low end and a high end, but we've added in a deep injection well at on average 900 gallons per minute, 850 to 950. And you can see that that range and the midpoint of that range gets us to where we need to be at about 2,800, which also then gets you to the 3,960 acre feet per year. So not a whole lot of wiggle room for those first years as you're continuing to put water into the operating reserve and to put water into the drought reserve. But once those reserves are full, then clearly it provides you some room, some wiggle room to meet the annual delivery requirement, but not a whole lot more than that. And so that's the goal, is to do the additional conditioning on the wells and then focus on a third deep well. Next slide, please. So in order to do that, there would be a cost for the well. This proposed change in the state revolving fund loan includes more than just a new well. And the idea is to try to renegotiate the state revolving fund loan for a little over $6 million. I think the engineer's estimate on the third well is a little over $4 million. That would increase the fixed cost of debt service and add about $66 per acre foot to the cost of the water. And it could be offset somewhat by the reimbursement of the WIN grant. That was a grant that was awarded a year ago, but we haven't received any money yet. And then there's a second round that we're still hopeful that we make the cut on. So there may be an additional grant. And this is a federal grant. So, you know, back to the earlier question about the cost of water, even for desal, you know, your cost of capital is related to grant monies and the then borrowing market and so forth. But our best guess is that it would increase the cost of water about $66 an acre foot. Next slide. So you can see that the company water rate that we pitched to them in a letter, or formally offered to them in a letter for the planned first year is $2,442 per acre foot. And that was assuming delivery of the full 3,500 acre feet plus the increment of 250 to the operating reserve, and assuming no deposit to the drought reserve in the first year. With the current injection capacity or capability, we can't meet that number. And if you only inject a little over 2,000, then the actual cost to Monterey 1 water is closer to $3,700 per acre foot, because the fixed cost has to be paid irrespective of your volume. So that presents a bit of a financial conundrum right now. which I'll circle back to in a second. After the commissioning of the final deep injection well and the Vado zone restart, the cost then comes back down because you're now meeting, you're delivering a higher amount of water. And then when you add the deep well, the third deep well, sorry, then you're back to that $66 difference between planned first year and fully born with a third deep well. And so it's this interim period where there are some cost per acre foot issues. The first is the decision that allowed us to move forward had a soft cap of $1,720 per acre foot, which was the estimate back in 2016 before design was complete and construction was bid and any actual costs and change orders were known. Until the company files an advice letter to change the cost of water from that 1720 to the 2442 that you see in the first column, the district is footing the difference. So Suresh knows this. We've run some scenarios, but basically until that advice letter is filed, we'll be receiving $1,720 per acre foot, but paying Monterey One Water $2,442 per acre foot. And that could go on for a couple of months before the advice letter is approved. And it all spins off of when the advice letter gets filed. We've requested that the company filed the advice letter in advance of receiving the potable, saleable water, which, as I said, would be likely mid-August. But they've signaled that they might wait until the operating reserve is full before filing that advice letter. So there's a timing disconnect in there where we're footing the difference. Now, if you can't inject, you can certainly produce 3,750 acre feet, but we can't inject it. And so under the current status, if all we can inject is a little over 2,000, then running over the course of several months until you fix it, or until you get to the third column and ultimately the fourth column, there's an issue of if it is costing Monterey One Water $3,700 an acre foot, and now they're receiving $2,442 per acre foot, we're finally into that advice letter filing level, there's still a shortfall for them. And we don't have a good answer for you yet, but as they adopted their budget and we adopted our budget, I don't think either of us factored in a prolonged months-long difference between a cost-based pricing strategy that is at $2,442 and $3,678. So there's two pieces again. The disconnect between the soft cap cost and the full tier one advice letter cost, that there may be some time in between where the district is subsidizing that difference. And then there may be a time where the district and or Monterey One Water are subsidizing the difference between the 2,442 cost-based approach and the higher cost because of the lower ability to deliver. And so that's something that we're going to have to pay very close attention to. And that timing is trying to get the swabbing and the final commissioning of the two existing deep wells and the, restart of the Vado zone wells is of utmost importance. But again, as you look at it, that only reduces the required subsidy by about it makes the required subsidy about $500 an acre foot. So this will come back. We're going to have to come up with some financial plan to make sure that that this is not a recipe for squandering all the reserves. The idea, of course, is that you can true up your cost of water each subsequent fiscal year. But that true up was really designed for things like labor, chemicals, and energy, and the differences between budgeted costs and actual costs, I don't think the true-up really envisioned $1 million subsidy over the course of a year and then put that in the following year. And so one of the schools of thought right now would be any subsidy that has to be carried may not get repaid in the subsequent year, but may have to be carried out over a 5-year or a 10-year period. So we're just formulating the ideas for that right now. But clearly you can see some of this disconnect between you got to pay your bills, but if you can't sell everything you said you were going to sell, you're going to have trouble paying those bills. Next slide, please. So going back over the remediation, this is the schedule. So June, July for exploratory borings, as I said, ongoing. Get into the well design and the compliance process with the Division of Drinking Water and others. Get it bid and awarded, and hopefully we can shorten that from this shown 2-month period to something less, and then start construction. And construction could take 6 months, could take 18 months. And that's another timing issue, which is you want to solve this problem as quickly as possible, but you can't make the calendar fit if you got to design it, you got to bid it, you got to give contractors a chance to look at a package and so forth. So efforts will be made to compress the schedule. But this does appear to be the best solution. It should be sufficient to get everybody to where they need to be, and helps us get that really sexy sports car into the garage of the proper size. So that's kind of it. I'll take questions if you guys have them.
Questions?
I have a few.
Please.
Okay. So Dave, on that last slide where you talked about the implementation schedule for the third well, when will that third well go before the boards for approval?
Yeah, and we have to have
we're already in July.
Yeah, and we have to have a funding plan as well.
Yeah.
Which we haven't heard back from the state yet on whether they're going to reopen the loan. Mike McCullough, are you on our call? Arlene, maybe you could unmute Mike.
Let's see. He was earlier.
Yeah, it looks like he's off.
No longer on the call.
Yep. My understanding is they haven't heard back yet. So, we budgeted $3 million in the budget, which would meet or be close to meeting our 75%. But it's not clear to me that Monterey 1 is well positioned to do $1 million off of their budget. And so we need to get a little better clarity on whether the WIN Act grant that's already been awarded but not delivered can cover some of this, whether the state's going to open up its loan. So I don't think we would come to our board until we've got a clearer signal of what the funding package would be. So best case, it's not going to be on the July 20th board meeting, certainly.
Right. But now in the meanwhile, you still have things like exploratory borings that you have going June and July.
Right.
And
so
you have a well design from June through August. So these are expenses that are being incurred without the boards, both boards approving.
Those there is budget for in the existing Pure Water Monterey budget. And I should also add the additional conditioning or commissioning of the 2 deep wells, what was up before is swabbing. There's also money in the existing budget for that as well.
Okay. And then another question I have is, so in the value engineering process, those 4 wells were removed. What was the savings that we were supposed to realize from the removal of the 4? And you may not have a number on the tip of your tongue, but I would like that number. I would like to know what we were saving versus now what we're going to spend.
Yeah, I don't think you would like the answer to that.
That's why I'm asking the question.
Yeah. First off, I think the only thing that was saved is our pride, because it was our engineers and John Lear who said this is probably not a good idea. But, you know, at the time, the budget for the wells was less than the budget for the fix. Let me take that back. The two well pairs, my recollection was more than what it's going to cost to do one additional deep well. But, you know, we've got the added ancillary issues of this subsidy of the water rate and how you recover that, how you true that back up, which are all unknowns. But I can, you know, I think my initial reaction without knowing the real numbers is it's not good math.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you. I've long vision here, so
No, you're kind of warbly.
I had a notice for Monk. So that may be a problem.
Yeah, no, I don't know if anyone else can understand you, George. We cannot.
No, George, if you turn off your video, you may pick up enough bandwidth to be heard clearly.
Committee Chair Riley seems to have lost his connection. George, can you hear us? Because it says his microphone is open.
Yeah. While we're waiting for George, Mary, do you have any questions?
I mean, I'm just trying to figure, do we have any recourse here? Is there anything that we can do to try to, I don't know, just speed things along a little bit? Because clearly it's.
Yeah.
Could we have a special meeting if that would do anything to get permission prior to, so that we could, you know, move forward?
Yeah, I think we will give you the options of a special meeting. Whatever the timing is that gets us done the fastest, we will do. Maureen's raised some issues that some early assumptions about electrical may have not been right, so you can tighten the schedule. There's some discussion about trying to tighten the design and the bid award process. So we're looking at all of that. I think we have to be prepared, though, to really look at the financial implications. It's the shortfalls, and it's time is the enemy here. I do have a call with our council tomorrow to talk about where these issues tend to fit inside our guarantees and the water purchase agreement. So we'll have an answer for what kind of exposure we have there shortly. But the problem is known and studied, but now the ramifications of how to fix it are still kind of being developed. So we're just kind of, I'd like to give you better answers, but we don't have them all yet.
Right.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, thank you. I missed some of that. Are there more questions or discussions going on that I kind of didn't start with?
No, I don't think anything.
Nothing critical.
Yeah.
What can we do to try to push things along more quickly? Special meetings, you know, that sort of thing. Those were just some of the ideas we were throwing about.
Okay, thank you. Does this go out to the public?
Has not yet.
But this is a presentation only.
Ah, good.
I think there was an idea that
Excuse me,
someone.
Chair, if I may,
Yes.
the agenda does state that public comment will be received on presentation items.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, Mr. Laredo.
Oh, you're right.
But it
Thank
sure
you.
does feel good to correct the lawyer.
My apologies.
Okay, all right, let's go out to the public, please.
I see Ian Crooks, hand is raised, but that may be from his previous comments.
Yeah, that's right. Sorry.
All right, thank you, Ian. I see no other raised hands.
Okay, back to the committee. Is there, I'm trying to remember an earlier conversation somewhere. Is there kind of a joint meeting with Monterey One and our group, our district, about trying to find the best path forward for the two agencies?
Yeah, it's beyond that. We have been meeting agency to agency, but now we've agreed to establish a joint monthly meeting with CalAm. So I think it's the first Wednesday of the month, might be the second Wednesday of the month. We will be meeting as a group to talk about these kinds of issues, and there will be some other things that will get discussed, but the two public agencies need to get a clear path for the remediation of this, and the three agencies, or the company and the two agencies, really need to know what's going to happen when. The company has an operating plan that they have to know when the water is going to be available and how much it's going to be in the ground by a certain point in time. You can't fully offset summer diversions from the river if you don't have the water already available. And so I think it'll be good to have all three agencies meeting on a regular basis. And so that starts, I think, this Wednesday.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's good. And we do have a unique.
Yeah, it does this Wednesday.
And George.
So if we've lost the committee chair, will one of you two other directors adjourn this meeting, please?
I would be happy to, unless Mary, you would like the honors.
Go ahead, be my guest.
All right, in the absence of the chair, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Thanks for the great report, Maureen.
Hey, Arlene,